There were 3 people in the car, but the camera recorded 4. There is a deeply unsettling mystery surrounding the High Van Pass. People often say that if you traverse the pass during the day, you will be treated to breathtaking vistas of the vast ocean, majestic mountains, and rolling clouds. But if you dare to cross it at night, there are things you encounter that you cannot quite be certain actually exist, or if they are merely tricks played by your headlights cutting through the dense, creeping fog. And here is the most terrifying part of the legend. According to a dashcam recording recounted by a long-haul trucker who frequently drove the midnight shift, there were supposedly only 3 people inside the cabin of his truck that night: the driver himself, his assistant, and a single passenger resting in the back seat. However, when they later reviewed the footage and carefully examined the reflection cast upon the front windshield, a chilling detail emerged. In the very last row of seats, there was an additional, unmistakable silhouette of another figure. It sat perfectly still, enveloped in an eerie silence. Its head was slightly bowed forward, and its long, dark hair was drenched, clinging weightily to its face. Throughout the entire 13 grueling minutes it took for the vehicle to scale the steep, winding mountain pass, not a single living soul inside the truck had any inkling that this entity was sitting right there with them. The most disturbing aspect of this encounter is the location itself. That specific stretch of the desolate mountain road has absolutely no designated spots to pick up commuters. There are no residential houses, no roadside rest stops, and no signs of human life whatsoever. There is only an oppressive blanket of fog, towering mountain walls, plunging abysses, and the small, weathered spirit shrines tucked away quietly along the edge of the asphalt. Yet, this haunting tale does not actually begin with the modern dashcam footage. It truly begins with a very brief, chilling piece of advice given by an old roadside vendor stationed at the foot of the pass. When you cross High Van at night, no matter who calls out to you, never answer. To 17 a.m. at the foot of High Van Pass. During the day, the High Van Pass is so breathtakingly beautiful that people easily forget it used to be one of the most nerve-wracking routes for drivers. On one side stands the towering mountain, on the other lies the vast sea. The road twists and turns relentlessly, climbing high up before plunging down steep slopes, with sharp hairpin turns where just a few seconds of distraction could mean going way too far. In the daylight, this place resembles a magnificent painting, but when darkness falls, the High Van Pass reveals a completely different face. The sea below transforms into a bottomless, pitch-black abyss. Thick mist pours down from the mountain peaks, swallowing entire stretches of the road. High beams can only penetrate a few meters into the dense fog ahead. As for the space behind the vehicle, there is always an eerie sensation that someone, or something, is following closely. The locals have many names for this place. Some call it the Cloud Pass, others refer to it as the frontier gateway between the two regions. And then there are those who do not say much at all, simply whispering. That place is highly sacred as the night grows deeper. Such warnings no longer sound like mere superstition. They feel more like a survival guide. The story I am about to tell happened during a late-night drive that seemed perfectly ordinary at first. A driver named Min accepted a trip from Hue to Da Nang. Accompanying him in the vehicle were his assistant, Lam, and a male passenger in his early 30s carrying a small backpack. The journey should have been entirely uneventful. The road was deserted, a light rain was falling, the vehicle was brand new, and the engine ran smoothly. However, as they approached the foot of the pass, the mobile signals on all three of their phones vanished simultaneously. It did not fade away gradually, it cut out completely and instantly. It was as if someone had just pulled an invisible curtain down right in front of them. Min glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was exactly to 17 a.m. He intended to crack a joke to ease the mounting tension in the cabin. But before he could even open his mouth, he spotted a small roadside tea stall on the right side of the road, its lights still burning brightly. In the dead of night, on such a desolate stretch of road, that warm yellow glow should have brought a sense of comfort and reassurance to weary travelers. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, the moment Min laid eyes on it, a cold shiver ran straight down his spine. The space in front of the stall was completely deserted. The only thing there was a single red plastic chair, placed facing the road. It looked exactly as if someone had been sitting right there just a moment ago, only to stand up and vanish into the shadows the very second his vehicle drew near. The silence inside the car became suffocatingly heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic wiping of the windshield wipers against the rain. Min gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white, realizing that the real ascent up the haunted pass had only just begun, and the darkness ahead held secrets they were not prepared to face. Min had no intention of stopping, but the passenger in the back suddenly spoke up. "Hey brother, let me get off to buy a bottle of water." His voice sounded perfectly normal. Yet inside the car at that moment, a single sentence was enough to make the entire atmosphere grow heavy. Min pulled over to the curb. Lam, the driver's assistant, opened the door and stepped out first, pulling his jacket up to shield himself from the rain. The water stall was smaller than they had imagined. A rusted tin roof, a single dim yellow light bulb, a few bottles of water lined up on a wooden table, and behind the counter sat an old woman with silver hair, wearing a thin raincoat, sitting as still as if she had been waiting for them for a very long time. Lam asked to buy 3 bottles of water. The old woman didn't look at him. She stared straight into the car. She stared for a long time. Then she asked, "How many people are in the car?" Lam gave a forced smile. 3 people, ma'am." The old woman kept her eyes fixed on the vehicle. A moment later, she said in a barely audible whisper, "Right, 3 people. Then remember to keep it at exactly 3. Those words made Lam freeze. Min, sitting in the driver's seat, overheard it but pretended not to notice. The passenger in the back didn't get out of the car anymore. He just sat there in silence, his head tilted slightly toward the window. As Lam handed over the money, the old woman suddenly grabbed his wrist. Her hand was so cold it made Lam flinch. She said, "When you go up the pass, if you hear someone calling your name, don't answer." Lam asked back, "Why is that, ma'am?" The old woman didn't reply. She just turned her face to look at the dark road ahead, where the fog was rolling down very low. Then she added one more sentence, "Especially when the voice comes from the back seat." Lam couldn't even force a smile anymore. He grabbed the water and rushed back to the car. Min hit the gas immediately. No one in the car said a word. There was only the sound of water bottle caps being twisted open. Crack, crack, crack. 3 bottles of water ... But after that, Min heard one more sound. Crack, very faint, coming from the very last row of seats. The car began its climb up the mountain pass. The first few curves were normal. Min was a veteran driver who had traveled the high van pass many times. He knew exactly where to slow down, which stretches were prone to rock falls, and where he shouldn't honk the horn for too long, as the echo could startle the passengers inside. But that night, something was different. The fog wasn't sitting still. It didn't blanket the road evenly like the times before. It swirled into distinct streaks. Sometimes it swept right across the hood of the car. Sometimes it drifted to both sides as if parting to make way. Lamb, sitting in the passenger seat, tried to turn on his phone. No signal. The passenger in the back had also been silent ever since they left the roadside diner. Min glanced through the rearview mirror. The passenger was still sitting there, both hands hugging his backpack, his eyes staring out the window. But behind the passenger, in the very last row of seats, Min caught a fleeting glimpse of a white streak. He blinked. It was gone. Min told himself, probably just the headlights reflecting off a raincoat. But there was no white raincoat in the car. As if sensing something, Lamb suddenly asked, "And Min, do you hear that?" Min asked back, "Hear what?" Lamb didn't answer right away. He tilted his head, listening intently. From the back of the car, there was a very faint sound. Tap, 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 like fingernails tapping against the glass. Min looked in the mirror. The passenger was still sitting perfectly still. No one was tapping. Tap, tap. It was clearer this time, coming from the left window of the back row. But the car was driving right against the cliffside. To their left was a solid wall of rock ... It was impossible for anyone to be standing out there. Min swallowed hard. He accelerated slightly. Right at that moment, the passenger in the back suddenly spoke up. "Don't drive fast." His voice had dropped. It sounded completely different from how it did at the diner. Min asked, "What did you say?" The passenger slowly repeated, "Don't drive fast. This stretch. People often cross the road here." Lamb let out a forced laugh. Who would be crossing the road on a mountain pass at this hour? No one answered. And then, about 10 meters ahead of the car, inside the fog, a silhouette appeared, standing right in the middle of the lane. Min slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched. The car jolted to a halt, skidding slightly toward the shoulder. Lamb screamed. The passenger in the back remained completely still. The headlights shone directly into the empty space ahead. There was no one there, only fog, and a small roadside shrine by the edge of the road, its incense smoke drifting sideways in the rain. The terrifying thing was, no one in the car had just lit that incense. After slamming the brakes, Min wanted to turn around. But pulling a U-turn on the mountain pass right now was even more dangerous than pressing forward. He took a deep breath and continued driving. The higher they climbed, the thicker the fog became. The reflective markers along the roadside flickered into view and vanished, like the eyes of some creature lurking in the dark. Lamb tried to keep his composure. He struck up a conversation with the passenger in the back. "Heading to Da Nang at this hour ... Do you have urgent business?" The passenger remained silent for a few seconds. Then, he replied, "I'm going home." Lamb pressed on. "Where is your home?" The passenger stared out the window. The other side of the pass. There was nothing inherently wrong with the answer, but the way he said it made both Min and Lamb feel deeply uneasy. The other side of the pass. It didn't sound like the other side of a road. It sounded like the other side of something else entirely. As the car neared the Hyven Gate area, the wind began to howl louder. On the summit of the pass, the silhouette of the ancient gate loomed through the fog, old, heavy, like a gatekeeper who had stood there for too many lifetimes. Min suddenly remembered what the elders used to say, that there are places that aren't just landmarks, they are thresholds. The threshold between the mountains and the sea, between Hugh and Danang, between the living and the dead. And on nights swallowed by fog, that threshold becomes thinner than usual. The car crawled slowly past the summit area. Right at that moment, the entire electrical system in the car flickered. Once, twice, thrice, the dashcam screen distorted with static lines. The radio turned itself on. No music, no host's voice. Only a harsh, crackling static, and buried within it, the sound of someone breathing. The car crawled slowly past the summit area. Right at that moment, the entire electrical system in the car flickered. Once, twice, thrice, the dashcam screen distorted with static lines. The radio turned itself on. No music, no host's voice. Only a harsh, crackling static, and buried within it, the sound of someone breathing. Huff, huff, with trembling hands, Lamb tried to switch off the radio, but the power button didn't respond. The breathing continued, extremely close, as if someone were leaning right into the microphone. Then, a woman's voice drifted through the car speakers, barely a whisper. "Let me out," Min froze in sheer terror. Lamb whipped around to look at the back seat. The male passenger was still sitting there. But this time, right next to him on the window glass, there was a wet handprint. 5 fingers, imprinted from the inside of the car. Min didn't dare stop immediately. He only slowed down, trying to get the car past the crest of the pass. But the passenger in the back suddenly spoke up. "Pull over." Min gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I can't stop here. This section is dangerous," the passenger said. "If we don't stop, she won't leave." Lamb turned around. "Who is she?" For the first time since the start of the trip, the passenger looked directly at Lamb. His eyes were bloodshot from sleep deprivation or from something else that Lamb preferred not to think about. He said, 10 years ago, I drove through here with my younger sister." The air inside the car grew thick. Min said nothing. Lamb didn't dare ask any further. But the passenger kept talking anyway. That night had also been a rainy night. The 2 siblings were riding a motorcycle from hut to Kant. His sister sat in the back, holding a small bag of clothes. Up on the pass, they encountered heavy fog. He rode slowly, very slowly. But at a sharp curve, he heard someone calling his name from behind. The voice sounded exactly like his sister's. He turned his head back, just for a single second. When he turned back to look at the road, right in front of him were the high beams of a truck. He didn't remember what happened after that. When he woke up, he was lying in a hospital bed, but his sister didn't make it. Since that day, every year on the anniversary of her death, he would travel across the pass, not to find her, but to apologize. Lamb remained silent. Min glanced at the rearview mirror. The passenger lowered his head. But behind him, that white shadow appeared once more. Clearer than the last time, a young girl, her hair soaked, her face cast downward, her hands resting on her knees. Min wanted to scream, but his throat froze up. The passenger continued, his voice trembling. "I know she is here," Lamb whispered. "Can you see her?" The passenger shook his head. "No, but every time I pass through this section, the seat next to me always goes freezing cold." Right at that moment, condensation completely fogged up the rear windows, and on that layer of mist, someone slowly traced a single word. "Brother." Just one word, but it was enough to make the passenger burst into tears. The passenger asked Min to pull over at a bend in the road ahead. He said that was where everything had happened all those years ago. Min didn't want to. But as the car approached the bend, the engine suddenly sputtered. The headlights began to dim, the steering wheel grew heavy. The car slowed down on its own, as if something were pulling it from behind. Finally, it came to a halt right by the roadside. Not a second too soon, not a second too late. Exactly in front of a small shrine nestled beneath a tree. Inside the shrine were a few old incense sticks, a cracked incense burner, and a piece of white cloth, discolored by sun and rain. The passenger opened the door and stepped out. A cold blast of wind rushed into the car. He carried a small backpack with him. Lam made a move to follow, but Min held him back. Let him go alone. The passenger walked up to the shrine. He knelt down. From his backpack, he pulled out a pale blue scarf, a worn-out little stuffed animal, and a photograph wrapped in a plastic bag. He placed them all before the incense burner. Then, he whispered softly, "I'm sorry. Nothing happened. No thunderclaps. No white apparitions. No weeping. Only the rain. But sometimes, silence itself is the most terrifying thing." Because a few seconds later, both Min and Lam saw a pale, bloodless hand gently rest upon the passenger's shoulder from behind. It didn't pull, it didn't squeeze, it just rested there, like an answer. The passenger closed his eyes. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't turn around. He only asked, "You've forgiven me, haven't you?" The wind suddenly died down. The rain began to subside. But just when all three thought it was over, a sound echoed inside the car. Knock, knock, knock. Min turned his head. The back seat was empty. There was no one there. Yet, the seat belt in the very back was tightening on its own, as if someone had just sat down. After the passenger got back into the car, everything seemed more normal. The car's lights stabilized. The radio went silent. The fog began to thin out. The road down toward Da Nang became clearer under the headlights. Min let out a sigh of relief. Lam didn't say another word either. The passenger sat in the back, clutching his empty backpack, his eyes bloodshot. Around nearly 4 in the morning, the car finally made it down the mountain pass. Phone signals returned. The screens lit up simultaneously with a barrage of notifications. The normal world rushed back so quickly that what had just happened on the pass felt like a nightmare. The passenger got off near the bus station. Before leaving, he bowed his head to thank Min. Then, he said a very strange sentence. "Today, your car picked up the right person." Min didn't understand. Lam didn't understand either. But neither of them wanted to ask further. They just wanted to go home. The next morning, Min opened the dashcam footage to check the section where he had slammed on the brakes on the pass. At first, everything was exactly as he remembered. The roadside stall, the mountain road, the fog, the shadow in the middle of the road, the small shrine, the passenger kneeling and crying. But then, Lam noticed a detail. From the moment they left the roadside stall, the interior camera had been recording the back seats. The male passenger sat on the right. The seat to his left was empty. The back row was also empty. However, as the car neared Hyven Gate, the glass inside the car began to catch a reflection. And in that reflection, there was a girl sitting right behind the passenger. She didn't look at Min. She didn't look at Lam. She only stared at the passenger during the entire journey. When the car stopped in front of the shrine, the girl leaned forward. Her lips moved. The camera didn't capture any sound, but judging by her lip movements, Lam guessed she said 2 words. "Let's go home." The realization. Min rewound the footage. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th time, both of them realized the detail that gave them the ultimate goosebumps. In the beginning of the video, when the car was still stopped at the roadside stall, the old lady selling water wasn't looking at the male passenger. She was looking at the empty seat right next to him. And she had asked, "How many people are in the car?" It wasn't because she didn't know. It was because she saw more than they did. Min immediately drove back to find the roadside stall. But during the day, at the foot of the pass, that spot was nothing but an empty plot of land. No corrugated iron roof. No wooden table. No dim yellow light bulb. There was only an old, red plastic chair, lying face down by the side of the road. You might ask, is this story real or not? Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe it was the fog, the headlights, a reflection on the windshield, or radio static. Maybe it was all just a series of coincidences woven by human memory into a terrifying tale. But maybe, just maybe, such stories exist for a different reason. High Van Pass is not just a road. It is a place where many have passed through in fear. A place where drivers once strained their eyes through every sharp curve. A place where travelers left burning incense for souls they never knew. A place where, amidst the majestic beauty of mountains and sea, humans suddenly remember just how fragile life can be. There are places that make us see beauty. There are places that make us feel small. And there are places that naturally make us speak softer, drive slower, and not dare to laugh too loud. Not because ghosts are definitely there, but because there, the loss of others still lingers in some way. In every small roadside shrine, in every winding curve, in every word of caution from our elders, be careful when driving through the pass. Don't speed. Don't turn your head if you hear someone calling your name. Those words might sound like superstition, but sometimes, behind superstition lies memory. Behind rumors lie accidents, and behind a ghost story, there might be a very real reminder. Live slower when passing through a place where someone never made it home. From that night on, Min kept driving, but he never accepted another trip over High Van Pass after midnight. As for Lam, he kept a copy of the dashcam footage. He didn't post it online, he didn't send it to the press. He just kept it stored on his device, like a piece of evidence that even he himself never wanted to look at again. And that male passenger, no one ever saw him again. The phone number used to book the ride was no longer reachable. The name on the app vanished just a few days later. However, about a week later, Min received a text message from an unknown number. The message contained only a single line. "Thank you for bringing the two of us home." Min called back. No one picked up. He texted back. No one replied. And from then on, whenever he drove through a mountain pass at night, Min always did one thing. He would look up at the rearview mirror. Not to check for cars behind him, but to make sure that the back seat was still empty. So, if one day you happen to drive across High Van Pass through the thick fog, and you hear a very familiar voice calling out from behind, don't answer right away. Don't turn your head too fast. Keep your eyes straight ahead, and hold the steering wheel tight. Because it's possible that whatever is calling you doesn't mean to harm you. It's just looking for someone to take it home, but it's also possible it was already inside the car before you even noticed. If you have ever heard a strange story about High Van Pass, please leave it in the comments below. Who knows, the next story we tell might just begin with your own words.